I was 7, shivering in our Dartmouth kitchen, the wind howling through the cracked window, clutching a broken hockey stick I'd saved up for with every loonie I could scrape together. My dad, Paul, staggered in, reeking of fish guts from the plant, his eyes burning with exhaustion and something darker, disgust. "You're a burden," he roared, his voice a blade slicing through the air. "Every single thing you touch bleeds us dry." My mom didn't look up. She just scrubbed a pan, her silence screaming louder than his words. I stood frozen, the splintered stick digging into my palms, my heart shattering like ice on a Halifax pier. That word, burden, wasn't just a slap, it was a brand, seared into my soul. They didn't just break my stick, they broke me, making me feel like my every breath was a debt, my every dream a theft. Have you ever stood in your own home, feeling like a thief for existing? Like your life was a mistake they regretted? That pain, it's a wound that doesn't bleed but never heals. I'm Sophie Tremblay. I'm 29 years old. And that moment was the spark that would burn their world to ash. That kitchen in Dartmouth wasn't just cold, it was a cage. Our duplex, barely 90 square meters, sat on a street where snow piled up half a meter high every winter, and the wind off Halifax harbor rattled the windows like it wanted in. My dad, Paul Tremblay, worked grueling shifts at the fish processing plant, coming home with hands cracked from ice and salt, his temper sharper than a filleting knife. My mom, Marie, trudged door to door selling Avon, her smile as thin as the catalogs she carried. We weren't dirt poor, but we were close enough that a Tim Hortons run felt like a luxury, and every dollar spent came with a side of guilt. "You know how hard we work, Sophie." Dad would snap if I asked for a new pair of mittens. Mom would chime in, "Be grateful you've got a roof." A roof, sure, but it felt like it could collapse under their resentment any day. I learned to tiptoe through life, keeping my wants small, my voice smaller. School trips to Citadel Hill? Too expensive. A sketchbook for art class? Use the back of old bills, Mom said. Once, I saved up $10 from collecting bottles to buy a used paint set. Dad saw it and scoffed, "What, you think you're some artist now? That's not paying the heat bill." I hid it under my bed, painting in secret, each stroke feeling like a rebellion. But there was one place I didn't have to hide, my grandmother Claire Bissett's house in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, 180 kilometers across the Confederation Bridge. Claire, a retired schoolteacher, lived in a colonial home with creaky maple floors and a wood stove that warmed every corner. She'd pick me up in her rusty Subaru, the back seat stuffed with library books and a tin of homemade maple fudge. "Sophie," she'd say, her voice steady as a lighthouse, "don't let them shrink you to fit their world." At her place, I could breathe. I could eat a second helping of poutine without a lecture about grocery costs. I could wander her backyard, picking wild lupins, without being told I was wasting time. Claire was everything my parents weren't. Where they saw a burden, she saw a spark. She'd built her life from nothing after her husband died young, teaching kids in a one-room schoolhouse before saving enough to buy that Charlottetown house. My parents barely spoke to her, probably because she never hid her disapproval. I overheard her once on the phone with Mom, her tone sharp as a maritime storm. "If you can't love her without conditions, you don't deserve her." I clung to those words, even as Mom dismissed them, saying Claire was too soft and gave me big ideas. But those ideas kept me alive, ideas that I wasn't a mistake, that I deserved more than a life spent apologizing for existing. The Dartmouth duplex was a pressure cooker, and by the time I was a teenager, I knew I couldn't stay trapped in it. Every day was a reminder that I was a cost my parents, Paul and Marie Tremblay, resented paying. If I left a light on, Paul would bark, "You trying to bankrupt us, Sophie?" If I asked for a new backpack after mine split at the seams, Marie would sigh, "We're not made of money." Their words weren't just sharp, they were a slow grind, wearing me down like the relentless Nova Scotia tides against the rocky shore. I stopped asking for things. I stopped dreaming out loud. I learned to move through that 90 square meter house like a ghost, silent and unseen, because being noticed always came with a price. At school, I buried myself in books, sketching secretly in the margins of old notebooks, because even a $5 sketch pad was too much. But those sketches were my escape, lines and colors that held the pieces of me my parents couldn't touch. Claire Bissett, my grandmother in Charlottetown, was my lifeline. Her colonial home, 180 kilometers away across the Confederation Bridge, was a sanctuary where I could be more than a burden. She'd sit me by her wood stove, hand me a mug of hot chocolate and say, "Sophie, the world's big enough for your dreams. Don't let them tell you otherwise." She'd show me old photos of her teaching days, her eyes bright with stories of kids she'd helped, classes she'd taught in a one-room schoolhouse on Prince Edward Island. Claire had built her life from nothing, widowed at 30, and she never let anyone define her worth. My parents hated that I spent so much time with her. "She's filling your head with nonsense," Paul grumbled once, his voice thick with disdain after a long shift at the fish plant. "You'll get soft, thinking life's all maple fudge and fairy tales." Marie nodded, adding, "You'll never survive out there with those ideas." But Claire's ideas were oxygen in a house where I was suffocating. By 16, I knew I had to get out. Staying in that duplex meant shrinking until I disappeared. College was a pipe dream. Paul and Marie made it clear they wouldn't help, and student loans felt like a trap I couldn't climb out of alone. Then, during a career fair at my high school in Halifax, I met a Canadian Armed Forces recruiter. She stood tall in her crisp uniform, showing a video of ships cutting through the Atlantic, soldiers working as a team, and a life that looked like it had purpose. "You're tough enough for this," she told me, her eyes locking on mine. I signed up that week, my heart racing with a mix of fear and hope. When I told my parents, Paul just shrugged, his face half hidden behind a bottle of Molson. "One less mouth to feed," he muttered. Marie looked up from her Avon order forms and said, "Just don't embarrass us." That was it, no hug, no good luck, just relief that I was someone else's problem now. I packed a single duffel bag, my sketches tucked inside, and walked out of that duplex without looking back, Claire's words echoing in my head, "Don't let them shrink you." The forces were my first taste of freedom. Basic training in Gagetown, New Brunswick, 200 kilometers from Halifax, was brutal. 5 a.m. wake-ups, 10-kilometer runs in the rain, and drills that left my muscles screaming. But it was freedom. No one cared how much my existence cost. They cared if I could carry my pack, follow orders, and not crack under pressure. I thrived there, learning logistics and comms, earning respect for my work, not my apologies. I was deployed to a peacekeeping mission in Mali, 7,000 kilometers away, where the heat and dust were nothing compared to the weight of my parents' expectations. Back home, Claire sent me letters, each one signed with, "Keep growing, Sophie." Those letters, stuffed in my locker, were my anchor. My parents? They sent emails, but not the kind you'd expect. "Your dad's truck needs new tires," Marie wrote once. "Can you send $600? I sent it, thinking maybe it'd buy me a sliver of their approval. It didn't. They never asked how I was, never cared about the sandstorms I worked through or the nights I lay awake, wondering if I'd ever be enough. Each dollar I sent felt like another piece of me I was giving away, and I was running out of pieces fast. The Canadian Armed Forces gave me a lifeline, a way to escape the suffocating Dartmouth duplex where Paul and Marie Tremblay's resentment clung to me like damp fog off Halifax harbor. In Gagetown, I learned to march through 10-kilometer slogs, to wire comms under pressure, and to keep my head down in a way that felt like purpose, not shame. Deployed to Mali, 7,000 kilometers from that cramped house, I found a rhythm, logistics, drills, the hum of a camp under a scorching sun. No one there called me a burden. No one tallied the cost of my existence. I sent money home every month, $300, sometimes $500, wiring it from a dusty base canteen, thinking it might stitch together some kind of bond with my parents. Paul would email, "Groceries are tight. Can you help?" I'd send it, picturing them buying milk and bread, maybe even thanking me. Marie never wrote much, just a curt thanks if I was lucky. Each transfer felt like a tether, a fragile thread holding me to a family I still hoped might see me. Then came the call that shattered everything. I was in Mali, 40 degrees Celsius, sand whipping my face during a supply run. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a rare call from home. It was Marie, her voice clipped, no warmth. Your dad's snowblower broke. We need $800 for a new one. Can you send it today? I gripped the phone, my boots sinking into the grit. Mom, I'm in the middle of a desert. Are you okay? Is Dad? Silence. Then she said, just send the money, Sophie. We're counting on you. No questions about the mortars I'd heard the night before, no care for the fact I was 7,000 kilometers from home, risking my life. I sent the $800, my fingers trembling as I punched in the transfer code, hoping maybe this time they'd see me as more than a bank account. Weeks later, I got an email from a cousin in Halifax. Saw your parents' new ATV tearing around Point Pleasant Park. They're calling it their winter toy. Looks fun. An ATV. Not a snowblower. Not groceries. A $2,000 machine for joyrides, bought with my money while I slept on a cot in a war zone. I sat in my bunk that night, the Molly heat pressing against my skin, staring at a photo of us at Peggy's Cove from years ago. Paul's arm was around me, but his smile was forced, like he was posing for a stranger. Marie stood off to the side, her eyes on the horizon, not me. I realized then, they'd never cared. Every dollar I sent wasn't building a family, it was fueling their entitlement. I was their ATM, their safety net, their burden who paid to exist. The pain hit like a wave crashing over the Halifax seawall, relentless and cold. I didn't cry. I couldn't. It was deeper than tears, a hollow ache that made my chest feel like it was caving in. You're enough, Claire Bissett had told me, her voice echoing from her Charlottetown kitchen. But in that moment, 7,000 kilometers from her warmth, I felt like nothing. I wrote a letter to Claire that night, my pen shaking. I keep giving, and they keep taking. Am I stupid for hoping they'll change? I never sent it. I tucked it into my locker, next to her old letters, and lay awake, the desert silence louder than any scream. Back in Canada, Claire's words kept me from breaking completely. Don't let them shrink you, she'd said, her voice firm as the red PEI soil. But Paul and Marie had spent my whole life trying to do just that. Every email, every call, every, we need this, was a reminder I was a cost they didn't want. When I got news of Claire's passing, 2 years into my deployment, it was like the last light in my world flickered out. She died quietly in her Charlottetown home, her wood stove cold, her mug of tea untouched. My parents didn't even call to tell me, her neighbor did. Paul sent one email, funerals next week. Can you cover the flowers? I wired $400, my hands numb, and flew back to Halifax on leave, standing alone at Claire's grave while Paul and Marie sat in the back, whispering about how Claire should have saved more. That was the moment I knew, no amount of money, no sacrifice, would ever make them see me. I was done begging for their love. When I stepped off the plane in Halifax after 6 years in the Canadian Armed Forces, I wasn't the same girl who'd left the Dartmouth duplex with a duffel bag and a heart full of hope. Molly had hardened me, not just with its 40-degree heat and sandstorms, but with the betrayal of Paul and Marie Tremblay, my parents, who'd spent my money on an ATV while I dodged mortars 7,000 kilometers away. Claire Bissett's death had left a void nothing could fill, but her will gave me something solid, her colonial mansion on Prince Street in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, 180 kilometers from Halifax. It was a 300-square-meter haven with maple floors, stained glass windows, and a view of the Northumberland Strait that caught the sunrise like a painting. Claire had left it to me, not Paul or Marie, with a note in her will, for Sophie, who deserves a home that feels like one. I moved in, thinking maybe I could finally build a life free of their shadows. I was wrong. Paul and Marie showed up unannounced 3 weeks later, their old Ford pickup rattling into the driveway with 2 suitcases and a smirk. We're between jobs, Marie said, stepping over the threshold like she owned it. Paul scanned the high ceilings and muttered, nice place. Claire always had taste. I didn't invite them to stay, but I didn't say no fast enough. They claimed the master bedroom, its king-sized bed and ocean view balcony, before I could blink. You don't need all this space, Paul said, tossing his jacket on Claire's antique dresser. We'll help you out. Help. That's what they called it as they rearranged my life. Marie shoved my books into a closet to make room for her Avon samples. Paul parked his rusty toolbox in the garage, pushing my desk against a damp wall. They started getting mail at my address, bills, flyers, even a subscription to Atlantic Fisherman. Within a month, the mansion didn't feel like mine anymore. It was theirs, and I was just the tenant who paid the bills. I kept the house running, $2,000 a month for heat, electricity, and Wi-Fi, all on my dime. I'd saved enough from my military pay to cover it, working as a leasing agent in Charlottetown to keep the lights on. Paul and Marie didn't offer a cent. Instead, they'd drop hints, casual but cutting. You're doing well, Sophie, Marie would say, eyeing the new coffee maker I'd bought. Don't let it go to your head. Paul would add, back when we raised you, we didn't have fancy houses. Raised me. Like I was a chore they'd checked off. I swallowed my anger, thinking maybe they'd settle, maybe they'd see me as more than a means to an end. But then I found the email. I'd left my laptop open on the kitchen island one morning, rushing to a client meeting 10 kilometers away in Stratford. When I got home, the screen was still on, but a new tab was open, Nova Scotia Property Transfer Laws. My stomach dropped like I'd missed a step on Claire's creaky staircase. I checked the browser history, pages on adding parents to a deed, claiming inherited property, and tenant rights in Prince Edward Island. Then I saw the email, sent from Marie's account to a lawyer friend in Halifax. Paul and I need advice. Sophie's house is in her name, but we've been living here. Can we get on the deed? She owes us for all we've done. I stood there, the hum of the fridge deafening, my hands shaking so hard I spilled my Tim Hortons double-double. They weren't just living in my house, they were plotting to take it. Claire's house, my sanctuary, the one place I'd felt safe. She owes us, Marie had written. Owed them. For what? The years of guilt trips? The socks for my birthday? The ATV they'd bought with my deployment cash? I didn't confront them. Not yet. I needed proof, not a fight. I started watching, listening, catching their whispers in the living room after I'd gone to bed. She's never here, Paul said one night, his voice muffled through the floorboards. What's she need a place this big for? Marie replied, we just need to push a little. She's always been easy to guilt. Easy to guilt. Those words burned hotter than any insult. I lay in my guest room, my own guest room, staring at the ceiling, Claire's voice faint but clear, don't let them shrink you. They weren't just shrinking me, they were erasing me, plotting to steal the only thing I had left. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was their mark. The email on my laptop, Sophie's house is in her name, but we've been living here. Can we get on the deed? Was a grenade, and the pin was already pulled. Paul and Marie Tremblay, my parents, weren't just freeloading in Claire Bissett's Charlottetown mansion, they were scheming to steal it, the 300-square-meter haven of maple floors and ocean views that was my only refuge. Their words, overheard through the floorboards, she's always been easy to guilt, lit a fire in me hotter than a maritime nor'easter. I wasn't their daughter anymore, I was their target. But I'd learned something in the Canadian Armed Forces, 7,000 kilometers away in Mali. You don't win by shouting. You win by planning. So, I didn't scream or slam doors. I got to work, my military precision kicking in like muscle memory. Claire's voice echoed in my head, don't let them shrink you. They wouldn't, not this time. I called Michael Chen, a lawyer I'd met during a military housing transfer case in Gagetown, 200 kilometers from Halifax. It was 10 p.m., but he answered on the first ring, his voice calm as a frozen lake. Sophie, what's the play? He asked. I need to sell Claire's house, I said, my voice steady despite the rage clawing at my chest. Quietly. Betrayal quiet. He didn't hesitate. Give me 48 hours to draft the papers. You got a realtor? I did, Liam MacDonald, a Charlottetown broker who'd helped soldiers relocate, known for moving fast and asking no questions. I met him the next morning at a Tim Hortons, 5 kilometers from the mansion, over a double-double and a box of Timbits. I need the house gone in 3 weeks, I told him, sliding the deed across the table. No signs, no Zillow, just buyers with cash. Liam leaned back, wiping donut sugar off his beard. Big ask, Sophie. You hiding a body in there? I smirked, but my eyes were steel. Just a couple of parasites. He nodded. Consider it done. The plan moved like a well-drilled squad. Michael prepped an airtight escrow, ensuring every document was bulletproof. Liam found a buyer in 72 hours, a retired couple from Summerside, 60 kilometers west, looking for a quiet home with a view. They offered $1.6 million cash, no inspection, no fuss. I didn't care about the money, I cared about the victory. While Paul and Marie were off on a Banff ski trip I'd paid for $4,000 for lift tickets, a chalet, and new gear, I orchestrated their eviction. I rented a cargo van under a shell company Michael set up, parked it 2 kilometers from the house to avoid suspicion, and hired movers to pack every trace of Paul and Marie's lives. Their suitcases, Avon catalogs, Paul's rusty toolbox, even Marie's tacky lighthouse figurines, everything went into labeled crates. I drove the load 10 kilometers to Seaside Storage in Dartmouth, securing Unit 12C, prepaid for 6 months. I typed an inventory list, taped it to the unit's door, and added a note, surprise. The Burden sold the house. Your stuff's here. Good luck. The day the sale closed, I signed the final papers from my phone at a red light, the $1.6 million transfer hitting my account with a ping that felt like a gunshot. I didn't celebrate. I drove to a cafe on Prince Street, 500 meters from the mansion, and waited, my hands wrapped around a Tim Hortons cup, the steam curling like my anger finally let loose. Paul and Marie's taxi pulled up at dusk, their faces smug, tanned from Banff's slopes. They wheeled their Samsonite luggage, bought with my money, down the driveway, laughing like they owned the world. Marie tried the key, her face twisting when it didn't turn. Paul banged on the door, his shouts echoing across the quiet Charlottetown street. What the hell is this? He yelled, kicking the oak frame. Marie spotted my note taped to the door, her hands shaking as she read it aloud. The Burden sold the house, she gasped, her voice cracking. Paul tore the paper down, crumpling it like it could change the truth. They stood there, frozen, as the reality sank in, no home, no claim, just a storage unit 10 kilometers away with their lives in boxes. I sipped my coffee, watching from the cafe's window, my pulse steady for the first time in years. This wasn't just revenge, it was justice, clean and legal, served colder than a Nova Scotia winter. Claire would have smiled, her words ringing true, don't let them shrink you. I hadn't. I'd burned their plans to ash with a signature and a lock. Selling Claire Bissett's mansion on Prince Street, watching Paul and Marie trembly unravel in that Charlottetown driveway, wasn't just a victory, it was a severance. The $1.6 million from the sale sat in my account, but it wasn't about the money. It was about cutting the chains that had bound me to their guilt for 29 years. I didn't linger in Charlottetown, where every corner held memories of Claire's warmth and my parents' betrayal. I packed my life into a rented U-Haul, just 2 cubic meters of clothes, Claire's letters, and a single photo of us at Peggy's Cove, her smile brighter than the lighthouse behind her. I drove 250 kilometers east to Fredericton, New Brunswick, to a second-floor walk-up apartment on Queen Street, barely 70 square meters, with creaky hardwood floors and a single window overlooking a lone maple tree. It wasn't grand like Claire's mansion, but it was mine, truly mine, no strings, no debts, no one banging on the door demanding I owe them. The first night in Fredericton, I sat on the floor, eating takeout poutine from a local diner, the gravy still warm in its styrofoam container. The silence was deafening, not the oppressive kind I'd known in Dartmouth, but a quiet that felt like freedom. My phone didn't buzz with Paul's demands for cash or Marie's passive-aggressive emails. I'd redirected their mail to a P.O. box in Halifax, cancelled the mansion's utilities, and blocked their numbers. For the first time since I was 7, clutching that broken hockey stick, I didn't feel like a burden. I felt like Sophie Tremblay, not the daughter who owed, but a woman who'd reclaimed her life. Claire's voice echoed softly, "Don't let them shrink you." I hadn't. I'd grown bigger than their small, selfish world. But freedom wasn't enough, I wanted purpose. A month after settling in, I was at a Fredericton community center, 3 kilometers from my apartment, for a veterans meetup. That's where I met Tara Singh, a former soldier who'd served in Afghanistan, her eyes carrying the same weight I'd felt in Mali. Over coffee at a nearby Tim Hortons, she told me her story, discharged, estranged from her family, sleeping in a friend's basement. "No one gets it," she said, stirring her double-double, her voice low. "They think you're fine because you survived. But surviving's not living." I nodded, my throat tight. "I get it, Tara. I spent years thinking I had to earn my place in my own family." That conversation sparked something. I remembered Claire's lessons, her belief that no one should feel small. So, I started Coastal Courage, a non-profit for women veterans across the Maritimes, based out of a tiny 50-square-meter office in downtown Fredericton. Coastal Courage wasn't fancy, just a few folding chairs, a donated printer, and a whiteboard with, "You are enough," scrawled in marker. But it was a start. We helped women like Tara find housing, navigate VA benefits, or just talk without judgment. One night, a woman named Jenna walked in, her boots worn thin, clutching a dog-eared discharge paper. "Heard you don't ask stupid questions," she said, her voice shaky but defiant. I handed her a coffee and said, "No questions, just a chair. Stay as long as you need." Within 6 months, we'd helped 30 women. Some got apartments, others got therapy, one even started a carpentry course in Moncton, 170 kilometers away. Tara became my right hand, her sharp laugh filling the office as we sorted paperwork late into the night. "You're building something real here, Sophie," she told me once, her eyes bright. "Claire would be proud." I smiled, picturing Claire's Charlottetown kitchen, her mug of hot chocolate, her unshakable belief in me. My parents tried to claw their way back. A week after they found the note at Seaside Storage, Marie left a voicemail, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Sophie, we're worried. This isn't you. Call us." Paul's message was blunter, "You can't just cut us out like this. We're family." I didn't reply. Family doesn't plot to steal your home. Family doesn't call you a burden. I donated their last box of junk, a stack of old Avon catalogs, to a Fredericton thrift shop. The weight of their expectations was gone, replaced by a lightness I hadn't known since I was a kid picking lupins in Claire's backyard. My new life wasn't perfect, but it was honest. I walked to work each morning, 2 kilometers through Fredericton's quiet streets, the St. John River glinting under the sunrise. I didn't flinch when my phone rang anymore. I'd built a home, not just an apartment, but a purpose. And no one, not Paul, not Marie, could take that away. The silence in my Fredericton apartment, 250 kilometers from the Charlottetown mansion I'd sold out from under Paul and Marie Tremblay, wasn't just peace, it was power. For 29 years, I'd carried their label of burden like a backpack full of rocks, each step heavier than the last. From that Dartmouth kitchen where Paul's words cut me at 7, to the Mali desert where Marie's cold demands for money broke my heart, to the email that revealed their plot to steal Claire Bissett's house, I believed I had to earn their love. Selling that 300-square-meter mansion, watching them unravel in the driveway, was my declaration. I was done begging. I was enough. And if you're listening, heart racing, feeling like you're carrying someone else's weight, hear this: you're not a burden. You're a beginning. You don't have to shrink to fit anyone's small idea of you. Claire's voice, steady as the red PEI soil, still guides me. Don't let them shrink you. She taught me that worth isn't measured by what you give up, but by what you build. That's why Coastal Courage, my nonprofit for women veterans in the Maritimes, isn't just a project, it's a promise. It's for every woman who's been told she's too much, not enough, or only valuable when she's useful. Like Tara Singh, who walked into our Fredericton office, 3 kilometers from my apartment, her eyes shadowed but fierce. I thought I'd lost everything, she told me over a Tim Hortons coffee, her hands wrapped around the cup like it was an anchor. But you showed me I can start again. That's the truth I want you to hold on to. You can start again, no matter how many times you've been knocked down. Here's what I've learned, hard-won through years of guilt and grit: set boundaries, and don't apologize for them. When Paul and Marie demanded money for their Banff trip, I should have said no. Instead, I sent $4,000, thinking it'd make them love me. It didn't. Saying no isn't selfish, it's survival. If I'd set boundaries sooner, I wouldn't have spent years feeling like I owed them my existence. Next, find your people. Coastal Courage isn't just an office with a whiteboard and folding chairs, it's a family that sees you. Claire was my family, not Paul and Marie. Tara, Jenna, and the women we've helped, they're my family now. Surround yourself with those who lift you up, not tear you down. Finally, act with purpose. Selling the mansion wasn't impulsive, it was deliberate, planned with Michael Chen's legal precision and Liam MacDonald's real estate hustle. I walked away from Paul and Marie's betrayal, 10 kilometers to a storage unit where their lives sat in boxes, because I chose my freedom. You can choose yours, too, whether it's leaving a toxic job, cutting off a draining relationship, or starting fresh in a new town like Fredericton. If you're standing in a place that feels like a cage, whether it's a Dartmouth duplex or a corner office, know this: you don't owe anyone your pain. You don't have to stay small to keep the peace. You're enough, Claire told me, her voice warm as a Charlottetown wood stove. I believe her now, and I believe it for you. Take that first step, say no, find your people, act with purpose. Your life isn't a debt to be paid, it's a story to be written. And you hold the pen. This story, my story, Sophie Tremblay's story, isn't just about a Dartmouth girl who sold a Charlottetown mansion to break free from Paul and Marie's chains. It's about every moment you've felt like a burden, every time you've wondered if you're enough. I carried that weight for 29 years, from a broken hockey stick to a stolen home, until I found my strength in Fredericton, building coastal courage with women like Tara Singh, who reminded me that surviving isn't living, it's just the start. Claire Bissett's voice still whispers in my ear, steady as a maritime lighthouse: don't let them shrink you. I didn't. And I'm here to tell you, neither should you. If this story hit you somewhere deep, if you've ever felt like your own family or your own life made you feel small, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below, share your story, your pain, or even just a moment that changed you. I read every single one, because no one should feel alone in this. If you believe in stories like mine, stories of breaking free and building something real, hit that like button. It's a small way to say you're part of this journey. And if you want more stories from the Maritimes and beyond, stories of grit, heart, and courage, subscribe to True North Courage. We're telling the stories that matter, the ones that remind you you're not a burden, you're a beginning. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's still fighting to find their voice. Together, we can shine a light, just like the one Claire lit for me, 180 kilometers across the Confederation Bridge. You're not alone. You're enough. Let's keep telling these stories.